I want to get to how the Vikings draft picks fit on the depth chart, because it's been somewhat of the debate of Twitter where some of these guys fit in, and I want to get your opinion. So let's just start. We'll go down the list here, and the guys toward the bottom who are clearly going to be practice squatters we'll leave out. But the key players here, I think it's reasonable to expect Justin Jefferson to be your number 2 wide receiver right away. Some people have pointed out to me that scouting reports talk about how he doesn't have the best separation ability and things like that. But even if you're a number 2, you can find ways around that by using tight splits that we know Gary Kubiak likes to do to get a little more two-way go opportunities for a receiver. You can find ways to put the ball in his hands. And I think he immediately jumps into number 2, and anything less than that is probably disappointing, even though it's first year.
Absolutely. I mean, I went back and looked at the 2018 draft class, and actually the Vikings drafted so many players in 2020, 15 players, that they broke the website on Pro Football Reference. I cannot actually go past 2019 without seeing this weird glitch. So thank you, Rick Spielman, for breaking the website. But I went back to 2018 because I was trying to think, what was the argument here with the wide receiver group? Who's number 3? And they brought in Kendall Wright. And we automatically, all of us right around now, are saying Kendall Wright's the number 3 wide receiver behind Thielen and Diggs. Well, Kendall Wright didn't make the roster. And I have a feeling that Tajay Sharp might be in that situation. That, you did sign him in free agency. He was one of 2 free agent signings of guys that weren't on your roster. But when you make a pick like this and you spend that high of draft capital on a player you anticipate being very, very good and being the heir apparent to replace Stephon Diggs, he automatically is the number 2. Here you go, Justin Jefferson. Here is a number 2 job. Don't screw it up. Like that's essentially what this move is, and that Tajay Sharp, Olabisi Johnson, Chad Beebe, the guys that are already on the roster and under contract, not to mention, the Alexander Hollins and Dylan Mitchell, Davian Davis, KJ Osborne, the rookie too, but they all come after. To me, it's Thielen, Jefferson, and everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's the way it has to be when you draft somebody number 22 overall.
Right. I don't know even if Tajay Sharp is on the roster. Like that could
I don't
depend.
think I think he could be the Kendall Wright of this year's team, just because he had some promise, and we looked at his rookie season with Tennessee and thinking, can he get back there? How does this offense fit? It might make sense, but at this point, you immediately, when you use that draft pick at 22 on Justin Jefferson, he is your number 2 wide receiver. It's his job. He just can't lose it, essentially. Like, if he loses it, it's on him.
Yep. The worst case scenario for him is that he becomes sort of a number 3, where they specifically use him in situations where they have 3 receivers, and BC Johnson is the number 2 on the outside. And we can't downplay that BC Johnson was able to step in and look really good in his first year and have some potential to grow on that. But I kind of think he is what he is based on his draft status, the athleticism, and so forth, where Jefferson, even if it doesn't work out that he steps right in, that he could be that number 3 who is used for slot and things like that. But I think ideally he starts off day 1 of training camp as your number 2 wide receiver, and it's his job to lose. Jeff Gladney, likewise, starting outside corner, we'll figure out the rest. Like, you pencil in Gladney, and then we'll see on Holton Hill, does he play outside? Does Mike Hughes play outside and Chris Boyd play inside? Or is Cameron Dantzler a part of this conversation? We have to find that out later, but Jeff Gladney starts out day 1 starting corner, his job to lose, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that him starting outside, just based on what Mike Zimmer said, that he projects as a nickel because of his size and his length. But you probably aren't going to have the time that it takes to truly guide somebody in the NFL to make that jump, because he didn't play a whole ton of nickel. He followed guys into the slot. Like, let's differentiate between actually being a true nickel in college, because they played a lot of 5 DB sets because, they're going against air raid teams in the Big 12, and that's just what you do to combat that. But he'd be tasked, when we talked with Gary Patterson, his head coach at TCU, his task every week was following the number 1 receiver. Did he follow them into the slot? More times than not, yeah. But I think that penciling him in at right cornerback, if you're going to have Mike Hughes play left cornerback, is probably not that's probably the realistic way to do this. And then you get to see what you have in Holton Hill and see
Yep.
if he's going to be able to, stay on the field this year and not have any other issues. And then with Cameron Dantzler, I think he could be a rotational corner. I mean, there's a lot of high ceiling there and upside with a player who was drafted in the third round, whose 40 time was a little suspect. And I don't think that's the reason he fell. I think that just he's small. Like he calls himself the needle because probably when he turns sideways he disappears. Like he needs to add weight to his frame if he's going to be
Yep.
playing this. And you have to tackle in the NFL, so I think that's a big reason there. But no, I mean Jeff Gladney, you spend these first round picks on guys in a year where you have so many holes to fill. Like if you project them anywhere other than starters, that's probably not the right fit.
Yeah, when you draft someone in the first round, you expect them to start and you expect them to be some growing pains, but also that they are able to fill those roles. And if they're not, then you start to wonder, okay, what happened here? Especially when those roles are there for the taking. It isn't like, okay, there's three corners in front of Jeff Gladney. There aren't. Like he has been basically handed a spot where he could take over. And there's some other guys that kind of are too later on the depth chart that I want to get to. But Ezra Cleveland, I know we've gone back and forth on this quite a bit, but I think that most likely is swing tackle. Second most likely is he starts at left tackle. Third most likely is he starts at left guard. You agree with that order?
100%. And I think the swing tackle thing is something you and I have not talked about nearly enough yet. That's not a bad option for him his first season. I mean, because you've got Riley Reiff, you're paying a lot of money this year, and unless you can get him to restructure on a contract extension and have him agree, and maybe you don't even know. I mean, we haven't seen him play guard in Minnesota. I know that we all assume that he was able to because I don't know, he did it like a million years ago at Iowa. Like that's the only reason that argument's brought up, because he has some playing experience doing it. Well, it was a while ago, but at least he has it on his resume. Ezra Cleveland doesn't. So, I mean, yeah, he could be a guard, but I think that that's probably the worst of the options that you listed for his rookie season. It feels like a waste. So why not have him be your swing tackle? And then at guard, you've got Pat Elflein, Avion Collins, Dakota Dozier, Drew Samia, like Kyle Hinton, potentially the 7th round pick. I mean, you have those guys fighting it out for the interior jobs. And, they haven't. I think this is a good situation too, that they can test out what they have by not having to essentially mess up Ezra Cleveland in the process. I know that that's probably not the right way to put it, but he's a tackle. He is going to be your franchise left tackle if this thing pans out the way that you want it to. Getting some sort of like short-term help at guard, I don't really know what that does for you, because I feel like the development it's going to take for him to play that position, a position he's never played to my understanding before, is just, there's other ways around that.
I think if he showed some potential for doing it, like if they saw signs of him being able to do it, and let's say they mix him in, in practices or something, and he showed some enthusiasm for doing it, maybe it would work out, because they still want to win in 2020, and putting a rookie left tackle in there against the Wolves is not an easy thing to do. But like you said, Riley Reiff moving inside is probably a better option than Ezra Cleveland being there, that you will get better play from Riley Reiff. And I think that the real issue for the Vikings pass protection has been the inside and not the outside. Like there's some people on Twitter who just hammer Riley Reiff, and I get it. They were trying to replace him with Trent Williams, and they drafted his ultimate replacement. Part of that is his age. Part of that is his price, but he's an average pass blocking left tackle. I looked at the numbers the other night. 40 tackles in the NFL, left or right, allowed more quarterback pressures last season than Riley Reiff. Like, he's not a TJ Clemmings. He's not a disaster. He's a solid player at that position, but you got to be looking forward with Ezra Cleveland. But if he were to move inside and play against the Akeem Hicks type of maulers, I think he gives you a much better chance at handling those than another rookie playing next to Garrett Bradbury. So we're on the same page with Ezra Cleveland. Do you think Cameron Dantzler has a chance to surprise us and all of a sudden end up with one of those outside starting jobs and have it be Jeff Gladney, Cameron Dantzler, and Mike Hughes inside? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think it is. If they feel like Mike Hughes is the best served to play in the slot, because that's what you need to realize. This team is in nickel most of the time, and Hughes was really good at it as a rookie. I mean, by the rookie standards, which means that Mike Zimmer isn't going out there criticizing him, being like, this guy has a long way to go, because the typical learning curve for corners in a Mike Zimmer defense takes about 2 to 3 seasons. Saw it with Trey Waynes, saw it with Xavier Rhodes. You didn't see it with Mike Hughes because he got injured, but just think about Mike Zimmer and the way that he talked when we would ask him about the progression of Mike Hughes from rookie minicamp to OTAs to mandatory minicamp all the way through training camp in 2018. He never talked about a rookie corner the way that he talked about Mike Hughes.
Right.
So the promise was there that he was able to pick up that position, and that he played some nickel when Mackenzie Alexander had the foot injury. I mean, he had to play, and he did remarkably well for the first few weeks before he got injured. So if I'm projecting it, I mean, I think Mike Hughes is your starting nickel, and I think Jeff Gladney is your starting outside cornerback. And then outside of that, is it Holton Hill or Cameron Dantzler? You know, Hill hasn't played that much. He's looked good in spurts, very brief spurts, but he just hasn't been able to stay on the field for one reason or another. So I think that putting Cameron Dantzler at one of those outside spots, or maybe doing a rotation between him and Holton Hill, might be the way to go.
Yes, and having those two basically battle it out, because there are some people, the draft analysts, who think that the Vikings came away with a big steal here with Cameron Dantzler, and his performance, his numbers against SEC competition, really impressive. Gave up 1 touchdown in 3 years, had 5 interceptions, low completion rates. I saw that Pro Football Focus put out a stat. He was one of the few people to perform well as a corner against LSU and Joe Burrow. You didn't see that very often this year. So, I think there is a chance that because his 40 was not good, that they end up getting a steal. Now, let me just run through a couple of these other players. You tell me who's got a chance to have a role. DJ Wanham, James Lynch, Troy Dye, Harrison Hand, KJ Osborne. Any of those guys in that middle late, any of those guys have a chance to have a legit role in 2020?
Well, I was going to say Wanham, just based on the fact that, if they are going to pencil in a Fadio Denebo at right defensive end and not move to Neil Hunter over there, or maybe they do. I mean, who knows? But regardless, if Fadi's going to be a starter, they need to have some depth to replace what Stephen Weatherly brought you, to replace, the pass rushing snaps that you get on third down. I mean, Wanham probably has as good of a chance as an Eddie Yarborough or an Anthony Zettel. That's the other guy they signed in free agency. Right. That would make a whole ton of sense. But I actually wanted to go to Troy Dye for a second. What do you feel about this? So I was reading Bill Barnwell's article that you and I were talking about off air, just about 32 players who are veteran players who have a chance to either get cut or traded after the 2020 NFL draft. And Bill threw somebody out there that I don't think anybody would have been thinking initially, in Avion Collins. And it makes sense. I mean, you got to figure out who your interior linemen are. Maybe it's a Kyle Hinton. I don't know. The 7th round pick who from a D2 school was playing left tackle at 6'2", 295, now going to try to play some sort of interior position, maybe. But regardless, that one was not where my mind would have gone. What if they cut Ben Gideon?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that.
And Troy died. I mean, because he's very limited in what he does as a run stopper. He's an old school linebacker who is not meant for this type. I mean, it's the reason that he's off the field when they're nickel. That's just not his role. And if Troy Dye really is the Anthony Barr mold, and he's, because he rushed the passer quite a bit at Oregon, and he's played in a bunch of different schemes. If he can fit that mold, why wouldn't they have Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, Eric Wilson, Cam Smith, and then Troy Dye, rounding out your 5, because he's going to have to play some special teams too, and then you don't have to have Ben Gideon on your roster anymore, the 4th round pick from 2017. And that to me seems like one I'd keep an eye on.
Well, he is not a dyed-in-the-wool linebacker anyway. He is a guy that could play that sort of big nickel cover linebacker at 224 pounds. So I'm sort of intrigued by the idea that he could, get out there and play some sort of coverage role. The thing that Jaron Kearse, they wanted him to be, it looks like in this draft, they took about 4 guys who could eventually be that. Yeah. Died in the wool, Jonathan.
I was about to say, do you think you were going to die on that hill and come training camp? Is that going to be one of your arguments, that when we're trying to figure out the final roster, you're going to die on the Troy Dye hill? Yeah.
Jonathan's about to just
I hate both of you so much right now.
Yeah.
Matthew during the draft, when he was like, about Josh, I believe it's Josh Metellus.
Yes. And tell us more about him.
Tell us more about him. There was another one you did that I was about to punch you through the screen.
Well, look.
If you want him, go get him.
No. Jonathan Harrison, you got to hand it to us. Harrison, hand it to us.
I just don't like you sometimes.
Look, I was KJ Osborne this way.
Can we go to break? I can't handle this guy anymore.